do it.
We're recording.
Yay.
Great.
Well, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too.
I am like the operations manager or studio manager, multiple titles. It's a small company at Candela. So we all have to wear different hats. And Brad had suggested or saw your name on a list and was like, Ana, you should talk to Jordan. And I was like,
yeah.
And I was very excited about this. I had the pleasure of scanning your film, and I got to scan some of the images from the Gallery of Illustrious Queers.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did such a great job. And also, it's just been so great working with you.
Oh, I'm glad. I definitely feel the same. It was a very interesting experience because the portraits are so intimate, and I felt like I was having an intimate experience just scanning them.
Yeah. That's so sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the process of scanning, like it's a little bit of a setup. It takes a long time. You kind of individually wipe every
Oh.
and every negative, and then well, in this case, transparency, and then you kind of mount it onto the drum. So I spent a lot of time with your work, and it was like, whoa. There's such a intense intimacy that felt that you could just feel through the work itself, and it was pretty impressive. So I don't know, without further ado, yeah, if you want to introduce yourself or anything.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It's so hard right now because actually, and this is not just be a bit of an interview, but um, yeah, one of my friends who's in the project just killed herself a couple of days ago, and so
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's just like I don't know. It's just I didn't expect it to come up. I was like, I'm not going to talk about that, but yeah, just it's like I've been having to kind of deal with her picture to send it to her family for the
Mm-hmm.
wake and stuff, and like it's just been yeah, so I don't know, for some reason just talking about dealing with the negatives and the intimacy and everything just like really it brings up a lot because my I was handing the portrait over to a friend of mine to bring to Wisconsin to her family, and they were just like we were talking about how in the show that her photograph was in, that she was hanging up next to Emma, who's our other friend who who also killed herself, and just like um how how much I thought about those things in that moment because Emma had just died and Corin is very young. She's a very young girl, and just like I always was afraid of that for her. And I just remember that moment of those pictures hanging in the gallery next to each other and the way that it made me contemplate, like what was in Corin's future, and just anyways, it's just so sad. And we were just talking about how much we don't want this project to be like a gallery of people who have died, and that's what that is. Anyway, so yeah, it is a very intimate project, um, and yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that I can't wait to show people your work.
Yeah.
But there's something, I think, I think with portraiture in itself, I think it can be easy to take a really beautiful photo, right, of a
Yeah,
portrait if you know how to, if you
yeah,
know the tricks. And but I think it's not as easy to capture intimacy and closeness,
yeah.
and to experience that in your work is something that's pretty
Mm,
exciting and fulfilling. And
mm,
I'm happy that you're doing that work with,
mm.
I think, a group of people that is so often ignored,
Yeah, totally.
especially in the art world, right? Or
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, I'm happy that that image is going to their
Mm,
her
yeah, totally.
um,
Yeah, yeah. It is hard to it is hard to photograph people with intimacy. It's like definitely something that we've been working on for, for a lot of years, just like trying to develop ways to work with people and with the camera and like how to have a how to have a camera in an interaction between yourself and another person in a way that doesn't kind of interfere with the interaction. And yeah, I think when I was younger, I starting out as a photographer, I really shied away from photographing people because I felt so self-conscious about I felt like a power relationship or something. I love that quote from Diane Arbus, how she says whenever she was photographing people, she felt like she was doing something very naughty, and it does feel like that because you can see from behind the camera, like that they look a little bit weird or whatever, that, you can see all these, you have this kind of sense of power when you are suddenly, in this kind of, it's like your gaze is amplified through the camera. Um, and it does feel like that. And like you're taking something from someone. And I really couldn't handle it when I was younger and I didn't photograph people. But then eventually I realized, all of my favorite photographs are photographs of people. And there's something about being able to look at a person in the way we can't in real life because we don't just stand there and stare at our friends or strangers.
mhm.
So there's something about a photograph that allows us to have an encounter with a person that we can't have otherwise. And yeah, and so, but then it's very hard to, it took me a long time to try to figure out how to be able to do that in a way that I felt like had integrity to um to the people I was representing. So yeah.
And what did that process look like?
Um well, it started with photographing people that I know. So I spent some years, I was living in a kind of intentional community in Oregon, and I spent some years kind of living there and photographing people, or maybe like a year or two.
Mhm.
And that was uh, an early process for me of kind of learning, you know, what it was like to bring the camera into my relationships with people and to build um, and to feel like the photographs needed to give something back to the people that I was photographing. And so that was mostly just kind of for the community. And I would make slideshows for people and make the images available for people. And then, yeah, and then I worked photographing my family for a few years. And working through kind of how to be a person that has all of my complexity of feelings about each of the people that I'm photographing and how to be in those feelings while I'm photographing and not um yeah, to like allow that kind of the impact of the emotional relationship with people um to affect the way that I worked with the camera.
Mhm.
um so that's how that started. And then in this project, like as I was started going through my own gender transition, it started out, I think, as a way for me to, yeah, kind of like deal with my identity and like appreciate the people around me that were a support and inspiration to me as I was transitioning. And then over time, it became more and more about, um, yeah, really wanting to uplift and celebrate people, like, yeah, especially, especially like more and more, like not really photographing very many white people, like, and just photographing more people of color and disabled folks and like people that aren't as much uplifted, especially in, narratives about kind of like trans identity and like the ideal trans body and all of these things that are that we see more in like popular
Yeah.
media. So yeah, kind of how it's evolved.
Cool. Can we see some of it?
Sure. Yeah, totally. Um, so yeah, so just let me know how you want me to kind of go through it. I don't know. Do you want me to, I can click on individual ones or you can ask about them or?
Um, yeah, let's. I guess we can kind of go through them individually.
Great. Yeah, so this is the project Gallery of Illustrious Queers. And yeah, and these are some of the portraits. Feel free, I'll just kind of flip through them. And then if you have any questions about individual ones or want me to talk about it, I can.
I know you shot these on transparency. What was
Mm-hmm.
your thought process with the media that you chose to shoot?
Oh
So.
my God, it will never do the thing better, honestly. It's so hard. It's so hard. Like this picture, you scanned this one, didn't you? Oh my God. Getting the shadows out of, like the shadows in this picture. I mean, I don't know how many hours I've spent trying to get the detail out of those shadows. I mean, this is like, because there's very low light in her house and it's so hard. Yeah, I, I mean, mostly the film, the media is determined by the fact that more and more film stocks are just not available, and so and in 100 speed, pretty much your choice is to shoot transparency. So oh my God, this one too. This one has killed me. I've learned so many things. Like, I mean, I thought I had been a photographer for a long time, but I have learned so much shooting this project. Like
Yeah.
this one, because the walls are beige,
Uh-huh.
it bounced this light onto her. You can see how the shadows are really kind of red, and I just could not get the red out of these shadows because of the wall color. I just had so many issues like this. Anyways, transparency is very difficult to work with.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I wouldn't really do it again, but eventually I was just kind of wedded to it because I had started the project and I wanted everything to match and how it goes. So,
Yeah. Yeah. One of the conversations with Brad was, wow, it's so hard to shoot transparency, and Jordan really nailed it. Like,
that's amazing because I literally am always feeling like I am just like such a failure.
no,
I
no.
mean, I don't want to use that word, but I mean, just the amount of time that I'm like, wow, all of my years of education and I can't, like, why can I still not expose a frame perfectly, But I've really struggled with the technical aspects of photography. I think when I was an undergrad, I really didn't want to pay attention to any of that. And I was more interested in the conceptual things that I was doing. And then when I got into an MFA program, then it's not time to learn technical skills anymore. Then you're like, it's all about concept. And I was like, I mean, I literally had to have other grad students. I would like, please, can you just tell me how to do it? Like, I was just like trying so hard, and so I've really struggled, and then eventually I worked it out, but it's been pretty challenging to get my technical skills back up, even though I have plenty of education and I like teach photography.
I
Yeah.
well, I think you nailed it. So
Thank you. I'm glad.
yeah, yeah. I know with transparency specifically, there's not a lot of room for mistakes, so you really have to, like, uh, get it. And yeah, I definitely think you got it in a lot in these.
Thank you. It's great to hear.
um, and yeah, I was on your website and I read that you were inspired. Well, not inspired, but that there was a little bit of a connection with the gallery of illustrious Americans, which
Mm,
I did look up. It was very interesting because also very intimate portraits
mm,
um, of the Americans that were coming in. But what do you think
yeah,
that, or what was the conversation between the portraits that you take? And
yeah. So yeah, so that Matthew Brady project, Gallery of Illustrious Americans, was from it was a daguerreotype project in the 1850s, so really soon after the invention of photography. And Matthew Brady, you may know, is early American photographer. He had this like uh, portrait studio in New York. He also shot the Civil War, but the those portraits were, I see them as very much a kind of settler project because it's the 1850s. So, the United States is still very new, and he photographs all of these different white, for people from different fields, a lot of, statespeople or military people or artists or, poets, like, and all white settler men. And it it gives the effect of, or it creates the effect of making it seem as though the United States has this like established tradition of, upright citizens, and they are these kind of model citizens that people are supposed to aspire to be. Um, and but of course, citizenship, the idea of citizenship in the United States at that point is still fairly new. It's like so I really see that as a project of establishing, what it's, who it is to, what it is to be an American,
mhm.
as, to be this kind of like white male upright citizen. And so I wanted to propose this in relationship to that as a way of thinking about, how do we think about people who are gender deviants,
Mhm.
how do they challenge our ideas of, who it is to be a citizen and what it is to be, uh, a citizen of our contemporary world. So, so yeah, it's kind of like a challenge to that project and thinking about the ways that that transgender people and people of color, really challenge what was supposed to be the project of the United States, to and challenge it to actually be something that's free, has freedom and liberty and equality and civil rights and all of these things that were supposed to be part of the United States, but really were kind of a myth at that point, and still today, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all right, so you said earlier, I'm not shooting this film again. Does that mean you're done with this project? Does it feel complete?
Um, yeah, I think it is kind of complete. I I I didn't know if it would keep going on. I mean, I'm still open to photographing more portraits, but yeah, something just shifted where I just felt like I kind of have been closing it up and finishing up the kind of unfinished business with things and moving on to other projects. So not that I'm not going to keep shooting portraiture work. I'm going to keep working on projects about trans folks. But I think one of the things that I want to expand upon from this project is expanding from portraiture into more kind of telling narratives about trans life and trans identity and trans histories. So I want to be able to expand from portraiture into having kind of, more complicated and, not narrative in the way of like an editorial kind of, but like bodies of photographs that tell stories.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I love this one of Emma.
Yeah, I know, me too. I haven't seen this for a while.
I guess we can kind of jump into your
Mm.
work, which
Sure.
was exciting to see. Definitely uh, a
Very
different,
different.
yeah, different direction.
Yeah.
No more transparency.
No, it's not even, I'm not even taking the pictures. Yeah, it's totally different. You're talking about the settler one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Should I switch over to that?
Where are,
Yeah,
did you?
great.
Okay.
So do you want me to just talk a little bit about what's going on here?
I would love to hear.
Great. So so this body of work, and it's still very fresh, so there's going to be a lot of other things going on, but I want to make a series that explores the relationship between photography and American settler colonialism. So the ways that photography has been used to make the myths about the settlement seem to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the, these are photographs taken by the U.S. Geological Survey, and I I went this summer I was hiking in the Sierras, and there's the the Owens River Valley, which is, at the foot of the Sierras and the Eastern Sierras, used to be this. I was learning about the indigenous history while I was there, and it used to be this lake on Shoshone Paiute land, and it was completely drained to feed Los Angeles, which is 300 miles away. And so this is a US Geological Survey series of photographs that traces the whole 350-mile length of the aqueduct that takes the water away. And so I've been working on a scholarly article too that analyzes um, some that has like an analysis of these photographs and how they relate to kind of 1960s, 1970s conceptual photography with Ed Ruscha. It's probably more than we can get into in the time that we have, but I have been really thinking about the way that U.S. Geological Survey photographs, the ones from the 1850s, they were meant to survey the land, and then they later on became considered to be fine art objects. They're now, you can see them exhibited in Oakland at the Museum of California. So um, so and these obviously play into all the kind of languages of abstraction, and so it's just like looking at those kinds of relationships between photography, settler colonialism, art, and like the kinds of myths about the land and settlers' relationships to the land.
Oh, oh, very cool. And what inspired, was that going hiking is what inspired that to you, or what pulled you into this?
Yeah, I've been, well, I in my because I'm also a photo historian, and so I just finished writing my dissertation about settler colonialism and modernist photography this year, and I, yeah, there's usually, you know, these kind of playbacks between my research and my work, um and so yeah, it's I want to have a kind of a way to talk about that and have like an outlet for it that isn't necessarily through research and writing in the same kind of way, but is just a visual processing of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at these next to, you know, or right after your portraits. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
mean, oh, sorry.
yeah, you go ahead.
They're so different, you know, and I think, but they are, for me, they're all united by my politics and, you know, the way that I am, and they are also united by having some kind of grounding in research into the history of photography. So even though they look very different, they have completely different aesthetic strategies, and I'm just accepting that I'm not going to be that photographer that has like a really kind of consistent
Yeah. No, it's
look over my lifetime, like totally all over the place. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely. I think there's this connection of narrative in both of them. You know, that kind of brings them together as well, right? And yeah, uh, totally with a history as well of kind of how I don't know, even thinking about where photography is going now too,
Yeah.
and how it kind of like plays a role in our society. Um, I think that your work is confronting that a little bit, or kind of uh, poking a little bit, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a way that I really appreciate.
Mm,
Um, uh, so I mean, I definitely see the connection. It's interesting to see that there's obviously like a difference in how they're being, how the story's being told, but
yeah.
I feel the connection that is there. Um,
Mm,
Thanks.
cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for talking about these. And then I know that there was another, um, uh, the, uh, uh, we wish that we have,
Yeah. That other weird one.
that other
We
thing.
don't have to talk about that. I know it's so much, but and
No,
it's
I
also
love
a
it.
completely different project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so right now, I mean,
Hmm.
so you're working on the Settlers project.
Hmm.
Is that what you're kind of deep into right now, or is there other things that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, this is really, I'm working on this and then some research and writing projects, some more scholarly projects. So it's always a it's always a lot to balance both of those practices.
Mhm.
Um, but I've been doing some research into postmodern photography and making connections between that and settler colonialism. And then I've been also doing some research into trans histories of photography and kind of unearthing some of those histories, and then working on this. And there's a lot more that has to happen with this project in terms of like these are appropriated images, but there's also a whole, you know, a lot of shooting and other kinds of work that's going to come into it. So
Mhm.
it's going to be, yeah, I have a ways to go with this project. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. What are you gonna shoot?
I think I'm going to shoot work that is, I think I'm going to shoot work that's um, that is very beautiful in the ways that like we think of landscape photography in the United States.
Mhm.
That kind of to talk about how those narratives of beauty and the spiritual relationship to the landscape that happen through those narratives, how those are constructed.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm so I want to do some some like really nice, beautiful landscape photography,
Nice. That's
which
that's
is fun.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually another conversation that I was having. I just did a little road trip,
Mm,
kind of explored the West a little bit, but I think as any kind of photographer, you're like, what do I take? Like, what do I shoot with?
yeah.
But one of the conversations that I was having, I was having with Brad, was, what makes a landscape photography, like, what makes it a photo,
Mm-hmm.
and the two things that we kind of theorized was the narrative that it tells, right, or the
Mm-hmm.
narrative that we can find in that landscape,
Mm-hmm.
which, in working with a lot of different artists that do landscape, I think it can be very tricky to, there's a here's a photo of the landscape, right, and here's a narrative
Mm-hmm.
within that landscape,
Yeah.
and how we get that, to me, feels very uh, important, and the process can be so tricky
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
so
totally.
uh, I'm excited to see how, I mean, even looking at these, there it does feel like there's a narrative there, right, like we're,
Yeah.
but did the person that shot this know that that's what it was going to become?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I think that's such an interesting thing about photographs is the ways that they accrue meaning because, no photograph inherently has meaning on its own, but that is a meaning that we bring to it from our, social, cultural understanding. And so these photographs were taken, they're taken just to plainly assess and describe um, an aqueduct, and but they kind of become these abstract, um, these they seem to speak also in the language of abstraction, but then also what I can bring to it as an artist is that I can add in, once I add in the narrative about, not that it needs to be me that does it, but once the narrative gets added that this is about settler colonialism, that this is about resource extraction, that this is about taking indigenous land and resources, then that narrative will always be attached to these photographs. And then the kind of empty language of abstraction can't be empty anymore. It's gonna have that meaning to it. And and also, I mean, to tie it back also just to the other project, I'm gonna switch back to that. Um, that, like what happens, today with Corin and her dying, is just like that this meaning, like now, when somebody dies, when we have a portrait of them, it's never going to mean the same thing anymore, then it has a completely, then it becomes, all of the Roland Barthes stuff about his mother dying in the photograph. But it always then becomes that, about death and memory, and that we can't, there's the trace of the body that we're never going to be able to, be with in life again, so those meanings, that come into photographs are so, that's like what's so exciting about photographs, is that they don't, we have to bring the meaning to them, and like we can, and we can play with those meanings, and accrue meanings and change the meanings of other photographs by the way that we create meaning with our photographs, or so anyways, I feel like it's such a, what is kind of endlessly fascinating to me about photography,
Yeah.
and why I am never going to be done just like thinking about it and wanting to take new different kinds of photographs and writing about it and all the things.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what you shoot. Um,
Thank you.
what do you plan? Are you plan to, for the nerds out there? What are you planning to shoot with? Uh,
Oh,
film
um,
or digital?
actually, I think, well, I shoot with, okay, so I shoot now with two cameras, the Pentax 6x7,
Mhm.
and I'm just gonna switch to the view, off of the photo view. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I don't know how to do it actually. Oh wait, here. Okay. So I shoot with the Pentax 6x7 and the Mamiya 7. But I'm thinking about trying to get the Fuji, I can't remember the name of it. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a Fuji medium format digital camera.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I mean, at this point, every photograph that I take, I mean, even though it's a very expensive camera, it's like $10,000 or something, but every photograph I take costs like $1,000 between film and processing and scanning and
Yeah.
all of the things. So yeah, so I've just been like, well, maybe it's starting to seem possibly
Yeah.
not so possibly economical to make that choice.
Totally. Mm. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your work. It's
Yeah.
a pleasure to hear about it, and very excited to see the new project come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, and I really love the way that the conversation was able to evolve. Thank you so much.
I also like that we're both wearing pink.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I was like, oh yay, we're,
Yeah.
we're
Um,
vibing. Cool.
totally the
Yeah.
queers in the pink.
Thank
Hmm.
you, Jordan.
Well, thank you too. Bye.
Bye.